Good morning and welcome to Peasenhall Cemetery. Now this is a very small cemetery, one of the smallest ones I've been to. So I'll probably get it all filmed by the time we visit the final resting place. But this is a murder, another murder, and it's another murder which goes right back to 1902. It's a murder of a young lady, 22-year-old lady, and unfortunately she was 6 months pregnant as well at the time. It was never solved, though I have a theory on it which I shall give you at the end. But anyway, what we should do, spin you around, we'll have a look around this tiny little cemetery while I'll tell you all about Rose Harsent. One of Peasenhall's liveliest residents was a 22-year-old girl named Rose Harsent. She was employed as a servant in Providence House, the residence of Deacon Crisp, the local Baptist elder. She spent her spare time singing in the church choir and collecting X-rated verses. The other main figure of this rural mystery was another churchman, a lay primitive Methodist elder in his mid-40s named William Gardner. He was the foreman at the local seed drill works and an enthusiastic man of God, trustee of the local Sunday school, assistant society steward, and leader of the choir where Rose Harsent sang. He had been married for 14 years to Georgina Cady, who had given him 8 children, 6 of whom were still living at the time of this mystery. There had been an unpleasant little scandal involving the choir master and his singer. One evening in May 1901, 2 Peasenhall busybodies, George Wright and Alphonso Skinner, saw Rose Harsent enter Crisp's place of worship, a small building known as the Doctor's Chapel. When the 2 men saw William Gardner follow close behind, they quietly hurried over to the building and put their ears to the wall. They heard Rose yelp, "Oh, oh," and then laugh. She then told Gardner that she had been reading in the Bible about what they had just been doing. She was referring specifically to the 38th chapter of Genesis, dealing with Tamar and Onan. If you are unfamiliar with the Old Testament, let me just mention that Dorothy Parker named her pet parrot Onan, because he spilled his seed on the floor. Well, yes, if Wright and Skinner were to be believed, Rose and William were practicing something a good deal more colourful than hymns. The 2 snoops could hardly wait to share the result of their eavesdropping with everyone in Peasenhall. When Gardner heard what was being said about him, he exploded with rage and denied everything. He also demanded a written apology from the 2 spies. Wright and Skinner refused and remained adamant that their story was true. The senior members of the local Methodist sect held an informal trial on the question of Gardner's morals. Although Wright, Skinner and Gardner all testified, Rose Harsent, curiously, was absent. Confronted with this he said situation, the elders opted for damage control. They decided that the charges against Gardner were unproven but not necessarily unfounded. Some weeks after the Doctor's Chapel incident, a Methodist lay preacher named Henry Rouse claimed he saw Gardner and Rose walking alone together down a lonely lane one night. A month later, while Rouse was in the pulpit giving a sermon, he happened to glance behind him at the choir. To his horror, he saw Gardner sitting with his feet in Rose Harsent's lap. Gardner himself denied either incident had ever taken place. He was beginning to get a great deal of practice in denials. And then, sometime around November 1901, Rose became pregnant. She never revealed the name of the father of her expected child. In fact, after her efforts to induce an abortion failed, she attempted to keep her condition a secret. Rose continued in her increasingly worrisome situation until June 1902. Earlier in the day, Rose had received a letter which read, "Dear R, I will try to see you tonight at 12 o'clock at your place. If you put a light in your window at 10 for about 10 minutes, you can then put it out again. Do not have a light in your room at 12, as I will come round the back way. Rose followed the instructions to the letter by putting a light in a window at 10. It was a very stormy night with the rain pouring down and lightning illuminating the countryside. After the 10 minutes was up, she extinguished the light. Early on the 1st of June 1902, William Harsent visited his daughter, Rose, to bring her clean linen. He arrived at Providence House to an unusual silence. Within minutes of his arrival, he discovered Rose lying at the bottom of a staircase in a large pool of blood. Someone had slashed her throat from ear to ear and attempted to set her on fire. Next to her bloodied hand was a prescription for paraffin. It belonged to neighbours Mr. and Mrs. William Gardner. Authorities investigated Rose's homicide and found 3 letters in her room. One of these was a letter she had received the previous day. The others were X-rated verses to hymns. Authorities deduced someone had arranged a meeting with Rose on the evening she died. But who was this unknown person? The local medical examiner learned Rose was 6 months pregnant and estimated she died between 2 AM and 4 AM. He also stated that Rose had been stabbed in the chest, had a bruise on her face and jaw, and had hand injuries that suggested she had tried to fight off a knife attack. The investigation led to neighbour William Gardner. The married father of 6 was a foreman at a company called Smith & Sons. He had an excellent reputation and was considered a good man. Authorities charged him with the murder, however, after learning of the affair he was having with Rose. Authorities also suspected he had fathered Rose's unborn child, which could have been the motive for the murder. Gardner denied murdering Rose. He said his wife could confirm that he was at home all night. Also, a neighbour named Harry Burgess provided an alibi for him. The neighbour had apparently engaged Gardner in conversation before the storm. Gardner's wife also denied rumours of her husband and Rose engaging in a sexual affair. William Gardner had apparently slept until around 8:30 AM. His wife said she hadn't been very well and had been awake and up in the early hours. A neighbour heard her, through the paper-thin walls, going back to bed at around 4 AM. After being held for nearly 6 months, William Gardner appeared at the Autumn Assizes in Ipswich. He denied murdering Rose. Frederick Davis, a 20-year-old who lived next door to Rose, had been identified as a writer of the obscene verses found in her room. He insisted he had only written them because she had asked him to. A gamekeeper's claim about a trail of footprints between Providence House and the Gardner's home wasn't checkable. Even experts on handwriting couldn't agree if the midnight meeting letter was the work of the defendant. All but one juror believed Gardner was guilty. The judge then ordered a retrial. It began early in 1903 and was reported widely. This time all but one juror believed him to be innocent, so another retrial was ordered. Fortunately for William Gardner, those in charge of the prosecution decided there was no point. He was set free. He and his wife continued to live in the village for a while after this. After putting up with the continuous whispers and sideways glances from the locals, he and his family headed off to South London to make a fresh start. No one has ever been convicted of this crime, which remains unsolved to this day. Rose Annie Harsent was laid to rest in Peasenhall Cemetery in Peasenhall in the county of Suffolk, which is where we are today. Well, that's all the information I could find on Rose Annie Harsent. It's a very, very sad case. Now, at the beginning of the video I said I had a theory. Now, at first I really believed that he'd done it. But in hindsight, I think there's a more possible candidate. I think his wife may have done this. If you think about it, she said that she was unwell on that night and she was in and out of bed constantly throughout the night. And the neighbour, through the paper-thin walls, said that he'd heard her get back into bed at 4 AM. Now, what if she wasn't unwell? What if she had got out of bed? What if she had actually returned and got into bed at 4 a.m? That would have given her more than sufficient time to get up, go out, commit the murder, come back, wash herself up and get into bed. The handwriting, she said that she wasn't familiar with the handwriting of that letter. The expert said they couldn't confirm, or they couldn't agree on whether it was his handwriting or not. I think it was the wife. But that's just me. That's me being my Hercule Poirot. Anyway, her final resting place, Rose's final resting place, is just up here in front of me to my right. So I shall spin you around. And as per usual, we will go and have a look at it together. It's actually good to see that people are still coming out to these older graves, because this was a very sad case. And I wouldn't have thought there'd have been 2 murders in a place like this. Very small village. And it's quite clearly visited, because the grass is trodden down. There's a little pathway to it. And here it is. This is the final resting place of Rose Annie Harsent. Now I'll try and read it. As I said, it's one of the older ones again. In affectionate memory of Rose Annie Harsent, whose life was cruelly taken on the 1st of June 1902 in her 23rd year. Look, people have actually planted stuff on there and everything. That is so nice to see. I mean, the grave, this is over 120 years old, and people are still coming out, putting flowers on it and planting little plants in there. You don't get that in many places, but these small village ones. Now this grave, I've seen a picture of this grave when it was, well, 3 years after Rose had been buried in there. And a lot of it has actually sunk. Because if you see down the bottom, those 2 plinths that the cross is standing on, there's actually a 3rd one underneath with writing on it. Now I think somewhere I've seen what's written on the 3rd plinth, but it's actually sunken below the soil. And also the surround, there's a surround in the picture I've seen with her father sitting in it. I think the picture was taken in 1905. And the grey bearded gentleman was her father sitting by the graveside. I'll see if I can find the picture and put it next to this, so you'll see what I mean. Anyway, that is the final resting place of Rose Annie Harsent. Well, that was her final resting place. Now I seriously believe it was a wife. Yeah, make a comment below. Do you believe he was guilty? I mean, it's more than possible he was guilty of this. I do seriously believe that the murderer came out of that house. Whether it was him or the wife. Now, I'm kind of leaning more towards the wife, but it could easily have been him. I mean, if the wife had found out they'd been having an affair, even though she denied it after the fact, and she'd found out that Rose was pregnant as well, who knows what a woman could be capable of in those circumstances. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave it a thumbs up. I know it's another one of the old ones. And if you haven't already, then maybe consider subscribing. It's absolutely free, will not cost you a penny. And if you do subscribe, don't forget to hit that notification bell. That way you will be notified every single time I upload a new video. Anyway, that's me, Darren, from Peasenhall Cemetery in Suffolk. I will see you all on the next one, hopefully. Bye-bye for now.